And what are they bringing to life? Well, the 59-55, the abundance of spirit tied with temporary unions. So can you find abundance even in times when things are temporary? Even when your connections with other people can't last forever? Can you accept the fact that maybe someone who's your friend today might not be your friend tomorrow? And can that be okay? Can you at least accept the time that you have with other people without getting caught up in a thought about it? Can you let yourself move from interaction to interaction without becoming unnecessarily entangled within those potential unions and therefore losing access to your own abundance, losing access to your own spirit? Because that'll happen if you find yourself unable to accept that things in this life are temporary. Ah, well, thank you all for the patience. I appreciate that. That's so funny. Thank you, Joy. Hopefully you can hear me now. I just unmuted myself. Yes. All right. Good. Good to hear that we're connecting and communicating. So I'm kind of thinking today I'd like to talk a bit about the 2027. Quite literally taking the microscope of human design, that we look into the depths of who and what we are in these details, we can reflect them outward and see the configuration of the universe at any given moment. And so there's an awful lot going on in this image. The nature, the example, the temple, the leader, the pattern, the plan, the way, and the witness of it all. Each of these gates make up the lock and key mechanism in human design and Rave cosmology. So when we're talking about the way, gate 25, we're talking about the specific lock. And this lock of 25, it's always going to be 25 because 25 is the way. And the key, these keys are turning and changing with the ages. So right now we see that gate 37 is the way. We see that in 2027, gate 55 is the way. So simply looking at the way of the age that we are shifting into, from the 37 into the 55. So from this nature of communities, from emotionality, that's funny, we're staying in the emotional field for this. And so we're staying within the emotional field of the way, which means the way is not necessarily as clear as it could be. And so if we're looking at this wheel in here, we can see that everything that's in white, these white gates here, are part of the age of the sleeping phoenix, also known as the cross of the sleeping phoenix, when you find it lined up within a human being. And so the primary factor that we're looking at here is this north, south, east, and west configuration here. The nature, the pattern, the way, and the temple. This is the primary element, the 4 key gates that make up the cross that we're dealing with. And so the yellow text, the yellow numbers in the middle here, these represent the cross of planning. So that 37, all about family, all about being able to be tender, all about, say, the mother and the father, being able to really work with what's on the other end. And what is on the other end of the 37? Well, it's the 40th gate. It's the ego. It's denial. It's not my problem. I'm not going to do that. The 37's job is to be able to actually schmooze over or convince the 40 on the other side, the ego on the other side, that it's worth it to output energy and to do the work, to build the temple, for example. And so, speaking of the temple, on the other side, we have the 46th gate as the configuration of where the temple comes from. I believe an accurate other word for the temple would be the body, like the physical body. And so the nature of the physical body here we can see is the 40th gate currently in this age of planning that we live in. And so this 40th gate of denial, this nature of the ego to say, nope, not my problem, or to actually output the work and then to be rewarded with rest, which is a primary and deeply important element for the ego to be able to put in its work and know that it can have rest afterwards to recuperate and regenerate its energy over time. And so that's moving, the key to the temple is moving from that 40th gate and this work rest cycle that allows for the channel, the 3740, to be born into this age, meaning that we have emotional ego, in a sense, authority as a cross, if I could put it that way, since we have a channel there as people. That 3740, this emotional ego, these bargains made and broken or built up and projected upon and perfected and ultimately transcended from, these bargains are beginning to break down. And perhaps you've noticed by different supply chain things or how things are not in the store as much as they used to. Sometimes they run out of this or sometimes they run out of that. And I remember when I was younger, they didn't really run out of stuff. There was almost always this surplus of stuff ready to go. And yet, as we come into 2027, we're less than 3 years away from the shift. It's almost 2 years, as a matter of fact. As we come into this new age of the sleeping phoenix, these bargains are beginning to really break down. And the sleeping phoenix brings a whole new channel to the front, which is not about bargains. It's about the individual. And so, as Raphael was mentioning earlier, this 59th gate being part of the cross of the sleeping phoenix is also, I believe it would be safe to say, there is an element of mutation coming through this force as well. So coming through the 59, the way in which we break down barriers, the ways in which we find intimacy, and the way in which we create friction in this whole process. Deeply connected with our mating system, and according to Ra'uruhu, our ability to reproduce as humans organically is likely to reduce dramatically. And the mutation that is unfolding essentially relies upon our mutation to be ready for their birth. And so I mentioned a moment ago how the channel is changing to individuality from the 3740 to the 2034. And it's also shifting here to the vertical instead of the horizontal that forms a channel. Where in this moment we have the 9 and the 16, the 9 holding the nature, this nature of the world for the past 400 years that has been interested in the details, the nature of really getting down to, well, what is this about? What is that about? What's really going on here? You know, in a first line theme, what's really going on here? And the pattern of how we worked through that nature was through the 16, and it has been through the 16. This ability to try it out, to experiment. Well, you know, I got a detail on one end, we got a bargain connecting us horizontally. And what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to try it out. I'm going to try it out. I'm going to try it out. Well, let's switch out the details. Well, let's switch out the bargain. And let's try out a new pattern. Let's try it out. Let's try it out. Let's try it out. Let's try it out. Very collective in that sense, you know, willing to experiment, enthusiasm. Let's dive into this and figure out what's going on. And that element is moving into the 20th gate. The pattern of 2027 onward for about 400 years or so is going to be the 20th gate. This is right now. And I even want to look at the line for this gate. So one moment and I will open that up. So here we're looking at the 20th gate, gate of the now, able to form 3 different channels. This is a key element here. The fact that this 20th gate can form the channel of awakening, the 2010, can form the brain wave, the 2057, and can form charisma, the 2034. Each one of these connects with a different energy center. And this is perhaps one of the most unique situations in the entire body graph, because it's the only channel that has multiple potentials within it, different gates that can connect up. Every other channel is a perfect opposition, wherein this gate is the exact opposite of this gate, and they only really relate with each other directly, and then their own circuit away around the body graph as energy continues to flow. Whereas here in the gate of the now, the 20th gate, we're connecting the throat center. And so we have this throat center right here in this 20th gate that can connect to the 10, can connect to the 34, can connect to the 57. So what is right now, the 20th gate, really all about? Well, right now is about behavior. Right now is about raw power. Right now is about gentle, penetrating, intuitive knowing. That's basically what right now is all about, you know? And so we either have the direction in one's life, we have the generating principle in one's life, and we have the survival principle in one's life. These are the main themes that connect up with right now. And so the channel for this age is the 2034, the channel of the manifesting generator, and this is a channel of deep individuality. You know, this is about integrating this moment through a body that simply needs to be busy and a right now that can express itself. This means that most likely whatever is being thought about is being unfolded in the world around themselves. And if you're just joining the call, feel free to say hello via the little link in the text box down there in the chat. Love to hear your questions. Because it's all about right now, after all. So this is all about the cross of 2027 and the wheel that we're moving into. So this 20th gate of right now is becoming the pattern of life. You know, this 15th gate belongs to every single cell in every single living organism, the channel of the 15-5. And so this pattern, this nature of what is the extreme pattern, what direction are we taking our extremes? It's no longer about being willing to identify with a bargain based on details. And you know, that's really dominated our world for 400 years. It's allowed the Industrial Revolution and the development of all society as we know it is based upon identification and experiment with the tribal bargain to focus in on the details and find something we can agree about. And so even that paints quite a picture for our human history, because something that's happened with the mind ruling the show as the decision-making authority in the life for essentially the whole planet is that instead of actually finding a pattern based on the details that we can all like, love, and appreciate and embrace, the mental decision making of open energy center activation and transferred lack of intelligence has resulted in a society of corruption. It's resulted in all kinds of different behind closed door deals, so that there are people who are getting what they want, the few, and then there are the many who are not getting what they want and who are not being treated fairly or justly. Welcome to the call, Kayla. And so it's such a profound theme that we've had to live with for hundreds of years, and it's as if we've known nothing else. For our entire history as nine-centered human beings, the deeply receptive capacity we have to be in touch with nature and life that has been essentially absent for thousands of years in human history. As nine-centered beings, we have only ever lived in this cross of planning until 2027 hits. And then no longer is this pattern of being identified with experimenting on these details on some bargain where somebody was able to shake hands and form an agreement. And, you know, I didn't vote him in. I didn't choose that. I didn't agree to that. And yet it's impacting me. You know, this is the real world after all. And so then 2027 hits, and all of a sudden the background frequency, the actual vibration that is all around us on this planet Earth is shifting. And it's shifting very dramatically, because these are the gates, and underneath each gate is a line. Yeah, it's good to see you. It's good to see you. And so within each gate is a line. And so as these ages move, they actually go backwards through the lines and the gates. So right now in this present moment, and for the last 400 years, we've been in a first line theme, you know, very resonant with the ninth gate of focusing on the small is this first line of investigation, this first line of fear for survival driving intelligence. And so that's been the nature of this bargain, is that we are afraid for our survival, and that makes us somewhat smarter. And based on those smarts, we form a bargain and then we try it out. That's been the way of life for humanity for years now, hundreds. And then 2027 hits, and all of a sudden, the 2034 is the channel in the background frequency. Very busy in the now, very busy in the now, very busy in the now. It's not about agreeing with other people to do this or to do that. It is very simply the 2034 with the 55 and the 59. And I say simply, and yet there is so much underneath that. There is so much under the surface. If I look over here at the 55, I see a very powerful gate. I see and think of abundance first. I think of this capacity for the individual human spirit to either be blocked off from its abundance in one way, shape, or form. And I also see for the individual human spirit to recognize itself and thus no longer be blocked, and to be present with its own energy flow, its own process in life, its own way. And so I'll go over here and simply read off the line of the 55, because we're going from the first line to the sixth line. As I said, we're going backwards through time. We're going backwards through these lines. And so the sixth line is very different. This gate of abundance, the sixth line is called selfishness. This is the acquisition so this is exalted, the acquisition obsession that, though alienating, is still indirectly beneficial materially to others. The possibility of finding spirit through materialism. And so immediately we're seeing that on the top end of the scale for this selfishness, this ability to generate and to work with material wealth, or simply acquisition and the obsession of the acquisition of this material wealth, it may be alienating even though it can benefit others. And that's in the exalted form. In the detrimental form of the sixth line of the 55, we find where material abundance exists, but no one else gets to share its light. The no moon phase. The possibility that materialism becomes obsessive with a mean spirit that will not share. So we see that there's a shadow that is on the way that we've already been seeing for a little bit. I think we've all seen the possibility that materialism becomes obsessive with a mean spirit that will not share. It's almost as if the bargain that's been made by the so-called elites of the world are playing out this detriment right now. You see, they're not sharing their wealth. They're simply accumulating more and more and more and more from everyone else as much as they can. And on one hand, it's terrible, naturally. It's horrible. The fact that there are so many corruptions and so many abuses of human nature that are going on in this world simply because people don't want to share. I mean, how absurd is that? We were taught to share when we were children, and yet the most so-called grown-up adults don't actually know how to share, and they're killing each other. And on the other hand, it's not wrong. On the other hand, it's part of the program. On the other hand, it is written. This is literally in the genetic code of who and what we are, that the shadow of our future is a mean spirit that doesn't share. And there's a light in our future that is able to benefit mutually, though it might be alienating at first. It might be strange at first. You know, the nature of what it means to be a 2034 outside of the 3740. To be a 2034 in the world of the 2034, to really see what the manifesting generator is. I don't think we'll really even see it until 2020. 2024? That's funny. 2027 is what I meant, of course. Until 2027, when the background frequency shifts to the manifesting generator through the sleeping phoenix cross, and we actually have a manifesting generating background frequency. And so we can see that there can be dramatic changes on the material plane, because no longer is there this bargain that's being upheld. All of a sudden we might see even more people go on strike. We might see the machines stop working. We might see, well, I don't like the idea of it. However, I have heard of a lot of death occurring within some 5 or 10 years of 2027. And I would like to not see half of the population pass on. That would be quite traumatic. And the reason why I say that is because I believe with this knowledge, we don't have to witness so much trouble. We don't have to witness so much pain and suffering happening on this world, because we can begin to share the gifts that are hiding within each and every one of us. You see, there's so much to each of these natures. I'm only primarily focusing on the 16, the 9, the 37, and the 40 from the old cross, and then the 37 or the 34, the 20, the 55, and the 59 for the new cross. You know, the temple, it's all about the 59, and the way is all about the 55. So we have this individual human spirit that is open or blocked off from its own abundance. And this is simply that question, you know, it's almost ironic in a sense, and yet it adds up. So I was thinking this is like the answer to the question of the undefined ego's not self theme. This, am I worthy? I need to prove my worthiness. Where is my worthiness? Where is my value? Where is my worth? And that's sitting in the ego center, all those questions. You know, this is an ignorant, unaware motor. You know, it's simply a motor that pushes the body around. It's not an energy center that's forming awareness, which is profound to say. Even the fact that the ego center, the heart itself as an energy center, does not produce awareness. Perhaps that says something about the nature of why love is so elusive. At any rate, we see the 55 here in this question of abundance. And I see that as part of the answer to that open ego question. That pull of the not self when the mind tries to get into that vacuum and gets sucked up in it, you know, pulled into a black hole of who knows what's going on. And yet the magic of that is abundance is strictly a question of spirit. Abundance is simply a question of spirit. And so I'm going to read out the line for this 55 again, because it is abundance. It is selfishness, this line of selfishness. This is perhaps the cornerstone of human design, one of the most important elements that one can be aware of, what true selfishness means and what it's about. Selfishness is not about my ability to harm you, not in the light. That's only the shadow. The shadow has a mean spirit that does not share. However, the exalted selfishness, you know, the enlightened selfishness, knows that the material world is deeply valuable. Without this material world, there's no one here to talk about it, after all. It's a temporary experience, and we get to be a part of it. We get to co-create with the forces of life. And to be selfish, to be selfish is to truly know that you need to care for yourself. And only when you care for yourself do you have the ability to care or to love another. So the 59th gate, a gate of sexuality, a gate of dispersion of emotional energy. This is the ability to break down barriers and achieve union, you see. So we are bringing a mutation of what it means, essentially, to practice yoga, to break down the barriers that are in the way of union, of the conscious awareness of connection, and even one and the same with whatever the other happens to be. And so the line of this 59 is called the one night stand. This is the tendency based on personality or circumstances to accept only temporary unions that may be otherwise impossible or dangerous to continue. And so that's where there is a mutation occurring on what it means to participate with this one night stand, or more eloquently put, as this ability to participate with relationships and form intimacies with others that are good and healthy and mutually beneficial in the short term. And when allowed to be what it is, when allowed to be a short-term experience, then it's wonderful. You see, this 2034 is a very busy channel. It's always running around and running through things, and very busy, 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 busy. And this 59 is going to be breaking down the barriers. It's going to be breaking down the boundaries. And it's a sixth line. You see, the thing about the sixth line is that the sixth line sees through the whole circuit. It sees through the big picture of what is going on. It sees through the whole energetic chain, essentially the karma of its own nature, to see the cycle and recognize itself within that bigger cycle, and then be a role model of the awareness of the bigger picture. It's basically the purpose of any and every single sixth line in the chart. And so here we see the ability to work with short-term connections, short-term unions. And this doesn't have to be sexual, although it naturally often is, and especially is with the mind is running the show. However, when the authority is ruling the show, there is a completely different mechanism at play, one that the cross of planning did not bring, one that hmm, technically, in a sense, and in a way, the cross of planning was a part of the bringing of this mutation, of this shift. It is simply the stage beforehand. And so we get to actually live this life as part of those who witness the shift. You see, and what shift are we witnessing? We are witnessing a shift from the 13 right here. We are witnessing a shift from this 61, which is all about inner truth, individual inner knowing and inner truth, the mysteries of life. And it was in the first line, which was all about occult knowledge, if I remember correctly, the knowledge that has been hidden. And we have been able to actually bear witness to what has been hidden through this 61st gate. We have been able to penetrate into great, vast, extraordinary knowledge. You know, back when, say, the rishis of ancient India were the most advanced scientists on the planet, back when the most sophisticated thing we could do was simply meditate up in the Himalayas or something like that, they described various phenomenon that have been verified in a sense and described in different words through mechanics such as quantum physics and various other high-tech developments that science has confirmed actually came first from ancient Vedic texts. And there's even other knowledges around the world that spoke of this. Well, they spoke of more than what can be seen by the naked eye. And so the past 400 years, we've had this chance to actually reveal that occult knowledge and to make this unknown a known thing. And so now that 2027 is right around the corner, what are we witnessing next? What are we stepping into with our sight? Well, it's the 54. It is the 54. We are witnessing the marrying maiden. We are witnessing this gate of ambition. We are witnessing a shift in the way in which material reality itself is transformed. You know, this 5432 channel that the 54 is a part of, the channel of transformation, is a very powerful, adrenalized, pressurized survival mechanism of transformation that can do a lot of incredible things for the tribe of which it is a part. And now we're witnessing a mutation in the 54. We're witnessing a mutation in what the nature of ambition is and what it means to actually rise up in the hierarchy. It's not what it used to be. And so as a demonstration for that, I'll look to the other side. I'll look to the leader, the seventh gate. This is one of the primary role gates out of the G center. It has been on the 62. And once again, we're getting back into the details. And not only the details, but the words for the details, the manifestation of the details, and the ability to communicate those details, to remember those details, to logically put details together, well, or not, hopefully logically. And, well, I suppose we've seen a lot of experimenting with a bargain about details that are unveiling the truth for the benefit of the few. And we've seen a lot of that. However, it's not the end all be all. The fact is the cross is changing. This 62 is being replaced with a 53. So the leader is no longer about coining a phrase. It's no longer the new catchphrase that'll lead the way. Oh my God. Simply catchphrases, you know, the 62 is who coins a phrase. The 62 is who gives words to specific things like, oh yeah, that's a blah, blah, blah. That's a doobadoo, whatever it is. I don't have the 62 if you didn't notice. And so this has been giving people catchphrases, you know? Yeah, sheep in wolf's clothing, exactly. This 62 has always been going through and just giving these new catchphrases to lead the way. Ah, yeah, it's so wild, that old bargain. And yet it's being replaced by the 53. And I believe that 53 is opposite the 42, which it is. 42 in the root center, the gate of endings, the gate of not simply endings, the gate of completion, of increase, of building things up towards their completion. And yet here in the 53, what we're actually looking at is a force of beginnings, a force of new starts, a force of cyclical entering into new processes and allowing old processes to find their way in and to see where they go from there as a consequence of this present moment unfolding. And so who can lead the way? Well, who can lead the way is someone who's starting something new. Someone who has this beginning energy, this energy to start something fresh. We are starting a whole new process here. In my perception of the timing of life, that we actually, well, there was that old prediction of 2012 or even Y2K, like this notion that the world is ending, even Judgment Day, all these various things. And so like how the Mayan calendar ended on December 21st, 2012, and a whole new cycle began. There's some argument to the nature that the timing could have been a little bit off, at least in my perception. I think they were only a few years off, at least according to Ra. We'll see how things unfold. However, 2027 marks the beginning of the truly Aquarian age and the age of the sleeping phoenix. So the age of this individual who is, you know, they're at 2034. They're being very busy right now, generating and manifesting in that sense, because they're right there together. And what are they bringing to life? Well, the 5955, the abundance of spirit tied with temporary unions. So can you find abundance even in times when things are temporary? Even when your connections with other people can't last forever? Can you accept the fact that maybe someone who's your friend today might not be your friend tomorrow? And can that be okay? Can you relish and be okay and at least accept the time that you have with other people without getting caught up in a thought about it? Can you let yourself move from interaction to interaction without becoming unnecessarily entangled within those potential unions and therefore losing access to your own abundance, losing access to your own spirit? Because that'll happen if you find yourself unable to accept that things in this life are temporary and we may not be able to connect with other people in the long term. As a theme in the background frequency of all of life itself, you know? It's everywhere. We have the plan. Now this one's fun. The plan, the second gate, this is the gate where the magnetic monopole itself sits. This is basically the conductor of life. The origin of love and intelligence is coming through here in the second gate. And we see the 42, that 4253. The plan in this 42 was to bring everything to its highest possible state. The plan was to absolutely take this experimental bargain about all these details and to be all kinds of different selfish with it and build up society as big as it possibly can. This tower will reach. And then what happens next? In 2027, well, the plan is 51. The plan is the gate of shock. It is the gall to jump into the void, to jump into the unknown. It's like jumping into the 0-point energy field, or it's like jumping into a stargate. It's jumping into a black hole or a wormhole or a portal or the entire universe itself. And as Terence McKenna put it, discovering that the universe is a featherbed, that you can jump out into the void and you can be cared for by the whole of the universe itself. That you don't have to figure everything out in your mind and plan out every detail and then follow every detail. That you can be in your body in this life and trust the body to make its own decisions. And that in the trust of the body, the shock of what's actually coming, whatever that happens to be, whether that's X-Men children or Rave children or I don't know, Pleiadians coming through, whoever it is, the shock is the plan in 2027 and for the next 400 years or so afterwards. The shock is the plan. It's no longer about business as usual, growth, more. We're not growing as fast as we used to. We're failing. The old school strategic business world, that is no longer the plan. Literally genetically based on the mandala. The plan is the shock. And now which line of shock? Well, of course, it's the sixth line of shock, the sixth line of the 51. And that is the line of separation. I'm seeing in the exalted, this is in times of crisis, when all those around are confused and in disorder. The ability not to succumb to the panic, but to have the will and vitality to survive it alone. The power of the ego to meet challenges alone. So we can see that constant up and to the right. Yeah, exactly. It's a tired mindset trying to continually force growth. It's actually quite literally, it's a cancerous mindset, because what happens in the cells of our body in cancer is that electromagnetically that cell has been cut off from the other cells around it. And it's like, whoa, I'm all alone. What am I going to do? Well, I got to replicate. I got to make more. And so I'm going to keep making more, and I'm going to keep making more, and we're all alone. So we're going to keep making more, and we're all alone. So we're going to keep making more. And that's the cancer. That's literally cancer cells. That's like the motto, the mantra of what's going on when cancer is occurring. In my interpretation, at least. I believe it's scientifically backed, although We'll see what happens. And so the nature of this shock in this 51, this ability to actually meet a challenge alone, this is the exalted response to the plan. This is what the plan is in its highest exaltation, is that we find our aloneness, and in that we're able to meet the challenges of life. And so what does it mean to be alone? Well, in my perspective and in my opinion, being alone is essentially to recognize and honor what it means to be all one. To recognize and honor what it means to be one with all. It's all own, all one. And so to recognize that when you hurt someone, you're hurting yourself. I would say that's the fundamental recognition of what it means to be alone. In truth, in a light-hearted manner. And so the detriment here for the 51 and the 6th line, which is the theme we're moving into in 2027, the detriment is, curiously, it's the same gift of meeting challenges alone, but one by its attitude that invites disapproval that in the extreme may even prevent a successful separation. The egoism to meet the challenge alone that may provoke and empower the challengers. Now, isn't that interesting too? You know, I've heard this phrase that fiction eats fiction. And what I'm seeing here within this line of separation in the 51st gate, which is right here, it is the plan for 2027, is that we're going into a form of separation, the ability to handle your challenges alone and to be strong within yourself. And on one hand, there's that light, that power that I can trust myself. I can rise up to the challenge and go forward. And then on the other hand, there's the detriment, this more shadow of a nature, wherein we find that we still want to rise up to the challenge, and yet it causes problems in the world around us. It upsets everyone around us. And when we're looking at the program, when we're looking at the people that are succeeding in the world today, you might notice we've seen a lot of that. We've seen a lot of people that are selfish to their own benefit to meet their own challenges at the expense of everybody else. That makes everybody else primed and ready to challenge them. And that's why it makes me think of fiction eating fiction, because if this is truly a not self program to be so selfish and to need to meet everything alone, because Ra said this was a not self I Ching after all, that's all he could see, that's all that was around him, so it's all he could write about. They found the egoism to meet the challenges while provoking others. And thus fiction eats fiction, and thus corporate eats corporate, and thus people need to be able to stand in their truth to not be eaten by the fiction. Another line from David was, fact and fiction may never meet. And so what I see is a very temporary situation, you know, like everything in life. This old world and the bargains that were brought to us, their time is numbered, essentially. It can only last so long. And once 2027 hits and the background frequency is no longer growth and increase and market values and all this go up, you know, number go up. It is now, boom, you're being shocked. Number is doing something very different. And that could be down, that could be up. It could be sideways or the other way. It could do something very shocking. It could do something very unknown.
Yeah, it's very funny because now we are moving to less planning, less structure, like very like in the know, into the know, like all these fears about but you have to have your job and all this planning and stuff, and it's just going away. It's very interesting. Also, have you considered taking this perspective into the quarters?
Thank you for bringing that up, this notion that looking into what quarter the gate is within as a key factor in the awareness of what's actually happening here. because the quarter makes such a big difference. I mean, as we go around this wheel, this one, I love this image. I think this is such a wonderful image. We see from, yes, the 13th gate all the way down to the 24th gate, we're dealing with initiation, which is the world of the mind, the world of thinking about things. And according to Roz, where the first waking up happens, the first waking up to life and reality. This is where the mind is initiated into life. And what happens once we've developed a mind in this life, like as people genetically, we develop civilization. What does the mind do? Well, it wants to make life better for the body. And how does it do that? You know, everybody plays their role in society, and it's easier for all of us. We have civilization. Now that we have a group of people, we got a ton of people hanging out and working together, what else is there to do? Well, it's time to explore duality, which is all about our personal relationships with other people, which is all about getting in touch with how it feels to be with other people and what relationships are meaningful or not. And now that we've woken up through initiation, we're aware of reality in life. We have built a civilization and a society that can support us and make it so that we don't have to go out and kill for our food and gather berries anymore. We can go to the store and buy food. We've grown through duality. We've learned through our interpersonal relationships with other people. What else could there be left to do but mutate into something new? And how do we do that? Well, we answer the question of, what am I going to do with my life? Why am I alive? Why am I here? What is the meaning? Well, that's a mutation right there. And each of these faces bring a different answer to that question. And while this is not informed by directly studying exactly which gates make this up, I could give a little note on each of these that's kind of fun for me. The notion of, what am I going to do with my life to Hades? Well, Hades is simply going to burn it up. Hades is simply going to take this double masculine line and fly straight through, burn it up, do it the way he wants to do it. What does Prometheus do about it? Well, I'm seeing a masculine line below a feminine line. And the story of Prometheus, the one who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, what am I going to do with the fact that I only have a temporary life? Well, if you're like Prometheus, you want to take like the elixir of a better life and bring it to the world. You want to bring fire from the gods to humanity, you know? Bring in that fire. It's a fun one. Vishnu, with feminine underneath the masculine, I'm seeing sustainment of the material world and the perseverance it takes to exist in this world and how we can care for things. And then keepers of the wheel. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? Similar to Vishnu, in that I'm going to care, except for this is double receptive. This is double feminine lines. These are the keepers of the wheel. These are the ones who often go unnamed and unnoticed. These are the ones who work behind the scenes and make a difference for life of the whole, and yet they don't really get much credit. They're simply the keepers of the wheel. They keep it turning. And so I'd love to be able to explore each and every one of these gates and talk more about what's coming through with each one of these faces at another time. Definitely want to create some references that'll make it easy for me to explore these keynotes, because it's quite a fascinating topic, these godheads. You know, Ross said that we could name all of these basically whatever we wanted, that these are like genetic forces, or even, well, I guess quantum forces, because they're dealing with the dark matter crystals that are floating around in the atmosphere.
Like archetypes, you know?
Yeah, basically, they're archetypical forces. They're like what happens when you take a human and you stretch them out into an ideal, and then other people can be like, yeah, that one, that's the one I want, because that's that archetype. Instead of being a type, it's an arc of a type. It's even bigger of a type, or it's specific in its way. And yeah, something to look up to. And something about human design is that the primary message is that all of this and all these faces is mostly a distraction. Is that it's mostly what happens when the mind picks things up and is met in a transferred state. And that instead of serving these gods or goddesses, we need to actually serve our bodies, you know, as unique individual human beings. We need to serve thyself and let the cup overflow, because then everybody is doing what's right for them, and we can have a world with a little bit more joy in it, a little bit less suffering. Yeah, see if there's anything here that I still want to go into. The example. I guess I'm saving the best for last. This is the example. Gate number 1 is the lock. And our key right now has been the 32. So this is really something right here, because this is the 32. This is the nose. This is that ability to smell what ambition is genuine, which ambition is real, and what can actually bring transformation. So who is the example? Well, it's the people who have the nose for success. Is the people who have that sense about, this is real, genuine ambition that's going to do the work to create transformation on the material plane. And wonderful, now I'm an example of that. It's moving into the 57. So there is some similarity here. The 32 to the 57, we're still dealing with the spleen. So the example is still about right now and that ability to pick up on this survival instinct. Except for now, it's more of a gentle, penetrating intuition. It's not in the smell. So it's actually quite subtle in that sense. What the difference is in the example from one to another, at least in mechanical description. I'll explore the lines and see what the lines have. So the first one, I'll look at the 32 in the first line, is the gate of continuity, the gate of duration. The only thing which endures is change. Gate 32. And this line is conservation, the ability to be conservative with one's energy. So the nature for the past 400 years was about being conservative. It's like a first line here. It's fearful for its life. How much am I going to have? Is it going to last? Is it going to be okay? I need to make sure I have enough. I'm going to conserve. And so it's moving from that 32 into the 57, from this need to conserve energy to the 57, which is the gate of intuitive insight, the gentle, extraordinary power of clarity. In the 6th line is utilization. So it is no longer about simply conserving one's energy. It is no longer about simply accumulating more. It's no longer about retaining as much for my tribe so that everybody else can whatever. It's about how are you utilizing your insight? How are you utilizing your energy? Because we're all going to be conditioned to be very busy right now when this gate hits, when this 2027 hits. We're going to be receiving conditioning to be busy right now in the utilization of our life force energy. And so what is the exaltation of this utilization? Well, it is the acceptance that clarity is a double-edged sword. There are situations where understanding cannot lead to rectification. Here, Uranus's innovative quality can generally make the best out of an otherwise difficult but rarely permanent situation. Where there is no answer, only the possibilities of the intuition can make the best out of a difficult situation. And so if I had to guess, I would say the reason why Uranus's innovative quality can make the best out of these difficult situations, in part, is because as 9-centered human beings, we are essentially guided or ruled by Uranus or Uranus. This is our leading planet, has taken the role, usurped the throne from Saturn, and has now become the dominant force, at least on one level. The detriment is when clarity points to a problem, one is unable, because of circumstances, to solve. A tendency to anger and frustration that provokes inevitably futile action. The possibility that when the intuition cannot solve a problem, a tendency to frustration and anger. So we might see a lot of frustrated and angry people because they don't know what to do. If they trust their intuition, they might be able to find it. They might find the way. However, if they feel like they can't trust their intuition and generate frustration or manifest anger for themselves, then they're going to have to deal with that abundance blockage. Because as we've been talking about this whole time, this 55th gate, this gate of the way, this is all about one's abundance. And does one have an abundance blockage within them is my question. Because I would say if you don't have an abundance blockage, or if you were at least able to work through those blockages that show up, then your ability to make the best out of the temporary unions we have available to us and persevere in these challenging times by behaving in the now, transforming the material world, and birthing something new through shock. I mean, what a message there. I mean, the 2034, the channel front and center being here first and foremost, like I'm very, very busy. I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. What are they busying about? Well, they're transforming the material world with the abundance of their spirit in a shocking way, because there's a new beginning happening, and it has to do with the bonds that we make with other people and how they're not meant to last forever. And if we use our insight, then we actually have the capacity to persevere and to survive difficult, challenging situations. Well, I hope you've all had a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.
If you have enjoyed the show and would like to learn more about how all of this applies specifically to you, then kindly refer to the link in this video's description, Private Consultation. Here, we can dive into all of the details together in a recorded call. May your signature vibration of satisfaction, success, peace, and surprise find you in a good way.